this video, we are going to learn about vectors. Now, what are vectors? Vectors are a variable size container that can hold any type. Now, that type can be a primitive data type, it can be integer, boolean, or address, or it can be user defined data type, some kind of struct. Now, indexing in vectors is zero based, which means, let's say, if this is my vector containing 5 elements, now this 10 will correspond to 0 index, 20 will correspond to 1 index, and so on. And these vectors are growable, which mean we can add a value to this vector, and we can also delete an element from this vector. Now these vectors are quite similar to the one provided by C++ standard template library or list in Pythons. Now let's try to see some function that we can apply on these vectors. Now to use these vectors in move, we have to import a module, which is this vector module. So let's try to write some code. Let v be a vector of type u64, let's say. So let it be a vector of type u64, and let's create this. Let's give it 3 values for now, 10, 20, and 30. And now what are the various functions that we can apply on these vectors? Now for that, I'm going to open a page. Now these are all the functions that we can apply on vectors in move. Basically, as you can see, first of all, see the definition. Variable size container can hold any value. Indexing is zero based and vector global. Now, what are the various function? These are the various function. Empty length, basically to get the length of the vector. There is borrow to read the vector. Pushback, basically add a value to the end of the vector. Borrow mut, we can read the value as well as write the value. Pop back to delete the element from the end, and all these functions. There is also reverse, basically reverse the vectors. Now if let's first of all see this borrow function. Now we can see it acquire immutable reference to the ith element. That means we cannot change the value, we cannot write the value, we can only read the value at ith index of the vector v. So let's try to implement this. In vector module, we are going to call this borrow function, and we will pass immutable reference of this vector in this borrow function. And let's try to read element and index 1, this 20th value. Okay, all set. Now this function, this borrow function, return reference type. So we have to, in order to read the value, we have to use this star operation. Now let's try to print this value. Okay, you can see the output as 20. Now let's try to read the value for an index that didn't exist, basically out of bounds. So what will happen? Yeah, it will give us an error. Test was not expected to error, but operation with the, you can read it. Basically, the failure is that it is out of bound, cannot read the value because value didn't exist on this index. The vector has only a size of 3. Now let's now we have seen this borrow function. Now as I said, it return immutable reference to this vector v to this value stored at this index. So we cannot change the value at this index. Let's see what I'm saying in the code. Let's say if I want to access the value at this one and I want to change it to, let's say, 55. Will that happen? Let's see. No, it will not happen. Okay, let's try to just going to read percent %v value at this. Okay. Okay, so invalid mutation, expected a mutable reference. Of course, if we are going to change or write a value, we have to use mutable reference. But this borrow function return immutable reference, sorry, immutable reference, which means we cannot change the value, we can only read the value. So in order to write the value, we have to use borrow mut. As you can see, now again, uh, as we need mutable reference, therefore we will pass mutable reference to of the vector in this function. So you can see it return a mutable reference to ith element of the vector about if I is out of bound. Now let's try to access this value and change this value. Ampersand, we have to pass mutable reference to this vector. You can see the value of this index 1 is changed because this is a mutable reference. We can write value at this index using borrow mut. Okay, so this was all about borrow and borrow mut. So let's try to delete this for now. Now let's try other functions in vectors. Let's try with pushback function. What does this function do? Basically, it add the value to the end, add element e to the end of the vector. Now, if I'm going to make changes to a vector, even if you want to read, even if you want to change the value at some index, or you want to add new element, or you want to delete an element, you always have to pass a mutable reference of that vector in the function. So similarly, in this pushback function, we are going to pass mutable reference of the vector. So let's see what I am saying. Let's use this pushback function. We will pass mutable reference of this v. Let's add 40. Again, let's try to read this value. For that, we are again going to use simple borrow function. Percent v at index 3, let's say. Okay, you can see a new value is added to the vector. So now our vector looks something like this: 10, 20, 30, and 40. Now let's add another value. Let's say I have 50. So at index 4, the value should be 50. Let's try this. Yeah, you can see the output. Now our vector looks something like this. Now, similar to pushback, there is another operation, pop back, which basically delete element from the end. in, you can see in the documentation, there is a pop back function. Pop an element from the end of the vector, but if p is empty. Let's try this function too. Mm, Again, we are making changes to the vector, therefore we have to pass mutable reference. Let's try to run this. And so our vector contain 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 till now. Vector looks something like this. But after running this pop back statement, the vector looks something like this. So if I want to access element as 4 index, it should give us error. Yep, test for not expected to error, but it gave because out of bounds. So this was pop back function. Let's see some other function in our vector module. And there is reverse function. You can check it on it's on your own. Simply you have to pass mutable reference of the vector and it will return the reverse vector in reverse form. There is a pend reverse pend. You can trim the vector, trim reverse. You can simply check that is if your vector is empty, it will simply return true or false. Now see, in this function we are not making any changing, we are just reading the data. Therefore we have pass this immutable reference of the vector. Again, you can check this function remove scope swap, swap remove. Now the last function that I want to share with you guys is this for each function. This one, you can see its implementation. Basically apply some kind of function to each element in the vector, consuming it. And this is quite interesting, this for each. Now, in this document, you can see all the function, but if you open this source folder, you can open this, you can check it here, all the function here. If you are new and beginner and you want to learn all the function, you want to see that what function do what. So you can simply open this documentation and see, okay, this is happening here. In reverse function, we are basically reversing the element. What is the time complexity? Simply we go up and these kind of things. Basically see that how the function is implemented. Let's open test. Now in this test document, let us see this for each mute function. Let us see for this for each mute. Let's try to understand this example. Before moving on to this example, let's take an easier one. So let's try to change all the values of the element to, let's say, 1. So how to do that? We'll simply write. So this is the basic syntax. Basically, you are implementing some operation on each element E of the vector. So let's say what operation that I want to do. I just want to change the value to 1. So let's try to print it. Let's to read the value, we will use borrow function ampersand v, and let's read value at 0, 1, and 2. Let's try to run it. key. Oh, sorry. Here we have to pass. Yeah, you can see the value is turned to 111. Now let's try to understand this complex uh, example. Also, let's initialize S21, let's say. So what is happening in this line is, let's understand this. So we are reading the value, we are writing the value of each element to S. Basically, for first time, the value will be 1. And then we are incrementing the value of S. So S become 2. Again, now on the next element, I will run this operation. So next element value become S, which is currently 2. And S will increment it to 3. And again, this will run on third element. The value become 3, and it will S get incremented to 4. Now let's try to run this. Let's try to print the what will be our output will be. Yeah, you can see the output as 1, 2, 3. You can play with this for each mute. You can pass, you can make on your pass your own statements here. See how this works. And if you want to run any other functions, what this vectors provide, vectors module, just go to this documentation and yeah, apply all the function that you can see, length, reverse, trim, all that function. So this was all for vectors. Thank you.